A mysterious disappearance. The peaceful small town was suddenly stirred when Naomi, a 12-year-old girl, vanished without a trace. On the morning of the 31st of that month, Naomi's mother, Shantara, woke up as usual, prepared breakfast, and called for her daughter. But Naomi was not in her room. At first, Shantara thought Naomi might have gone to a friend's house or wandered around the apartment complex. However, after calling Naomi's friends and realizing that no one had seen her, a deep sense of anxiety set in. She had never gone anywhere without informing someone. Immediately, the police were called. Investigation begins. As soon as they received the report, local police sprang into action. Search efforts commenced, with dozens of officers combing every corner of the apartment complex where Naomi lived. They interviewed neighbors, checked security cameras, but there were no clear signs of her whereabouts. One day passed, then two. A whole week went by, and Naomi was still missing. The media started covering the story, local residents grew anxious, and law enforcement was under immense pressure to uncover the truth. Several theories emerged. Did Naomi run away from home? Unlikely, as there were no signs of conflict within her family. Was she kidnapped? But by whom? Could it have been an accident? Yet, no body had been found. Among all the speculation, one name began to surface in the investigation. Robert, the boyfriend of a woman who lived near Naomi's apartment. Robert, the mysterious man. Robert, a man in his 30s, had a reserved demeanor and worked a blue-collar job. He was not a permanent resident of the apartment complex, but he frequently visited because he was dating Megan, a young mother who lived nearby. Initially, Robert was not on the suspect list. He had no direct connection to Naomi, nor any known history of involvement in missing persons cases or violent crimes. But when the police delved deeper into his past, a chilling truth surfaced. Robert had a prior conviction for a sex crime. He had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for sexually assaulting a young girl, but was released early. This immediately put Robert in the spotlight of the investigation. The first clues questions began to arise. Where was Robert on the night Naomi disappeared? Did he have an alibi? Why was a convicted sex offender living near a missing child? The police uncovered several crucial pieces of evidence. Surveillance cameras near Naomi's home captured Robert in the vicinity around the time she disappeared. His girlfriend, Megan, gave inconsistent statements about his whereabouts that night. Some of Naomi's belongings were found in an area Robert frequently visited. From an obscure figure, Robert suddenly became the focal point of the case. But what really happened that night? The interrogation begins. With mounting suspicion, the police summoned Robert for questioning. For the first time, he sat across from investigators, his expression cold and indifferent. He claimed he did not know Naomi, was uninterested in the case, and was at home with his girlfriend that night. But when asked for specific timestamps, Robert began to show signs of hesitation. The police fired a series of pointed questions. Were you near Naomi's apartment that night? When was the last time you saw Naomi? Can anyone confirm where you were that night? His answers lacked clarity. He started evading direct responses. His statements contradicted the surveillance footage and Megan's testimony. Nothing added up, yet there was still no direct evidence to charge him. The police needed more. Expectations and pressure. While the investigation continued, Naomi's family was plunged into despair. The media frenzy intensified, with news articles and TV reports plastered with images of the missing girl. Public pressure mounted on law enforcement, demanding quick action. At the same time, the police knew that without solid evidence, they could not arrest Robert. If they let him walk free without justification, they might lose their only lead forever. With everything they had gathered, the police decided to turn up the pressure on Robert in the next interrogation. Was he truly innocent, or was he hiding a terrible secret? Exposing the contradictions, Robert's first statement. Robert sat across from the investigators, arms crossed, his face devoid of emotion. The interrogation room was cold and sterile, with only a table separating him from the officers. The atmosphere was tense. Inspector Larson started with a simple question. Robert, let's start with the basics. Where were you on the night Naomi disappeared? Robert sighed and shrugged. I was at home with Megan. She can confirm that. Inspector Larson nodded, taking notes. What time did you get home? I don't remember exactly. Robert admitted, but I got home after work, around 7 or 8. This was the first suspicious sign. Surveillance cameras captured Robert near Naomi's apartment after 9 p.m. The investigators didn't press him yet. They wanted him to dig his own grave. Megan's contradictory testimony. While Robert was being interrogated, Megan was also being questioned. Initially, she claimed Robert had been with her all night, but when pressed further, she started contradicting herself. "Did Robert leave the apartment that night?" they asked. Megan hesitated. Maybe to take out the trash, but it was quick." "What time was that?" I'm not sure. Maybe around 9:30? This was a crucial contradiction. If Robert left at 9:30, his alibi was broken. Furthermore, Naomi was last seen around that time. A pattern of evasion. Back in the interrogation room, the investigators tightened the noose. "Robert," Inspector Larson said, "our cameras show you near Naomi's apartment at 9:15 p.m., but you just told us you were home. How do you explain this?" Robert tensed. "That must be a mistake. Maybe someone who looks like me?" "You were wearing a black hoodie and jeans, correct?" Larson asked. Robert hesitated before nodding. That description matched the footage exactly. "So, you're saying it wasn't you, even though both the camera and your girlfriend suggest otherwise?" Robert was now visibly nervous. "Maybe I went out for a bit, but I didn't do anything." This was the first crack. He had just changed his story. The discovery of Naomi's belongings. While the interrogation was ongoing, officers were searching locations tied to Robert. They found a pink backpack in a dumpster near his workplace. Inside was Naomi's school ID. This discovery accelerated the case. The investigators knew they needed Robert to confess. They re-entered the interrogation room. Inspector Larson placed the backpack on the table. "Do you recognize this, Robert?" His face went pale. "No. I've never seen it before." "It was found near your job. Care to explain?" Robert clenched his jaw. "I have no clue." "Robert, lying won't help you. Megan's statement doesn't match yours. The footage shows you in the area. And now, we find Naomi's belongings near your workplace. We're not accusing you, yet, but this doesn't look good for you." Robert swallowed hard. "I want a lawyer." The room fell silent. This was the moment the investigators knew they had him. Increasing the pressure. With Robert refusing to talk, the investigators turned to Megan, who began to crack. "Are you sure Robert was home all night?" they asked again. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. I don't know. He left for a while. I fell asleep. I didn't check the time." Now, even Megan doubted Robert's alibi. Expanding the investigation. The police seized the opportunity. Forensic teams analyzed Naomi's backpack for fingerprints and DNA. Robert's car was searched for any evidence linking him to Naomi. His phone records were reviewed, looking for suspicious activity. They weren't going to let this case slip away. Psychological interrogation tactics. In the next interrogation session, the police employed psychological tactics. They presented fabricated evidence, blurred images resembling Naomi inside Robert's car. "We found these, Robert. Care to explain?" Larson asked. Robert's eyes widened. That's not real." "Then why does it look exactly like Naomi?" This subtle move pushed Robert into visible panic. His hands trembled, and he rubbed his face aggressively. A classic sign of deception. "I don't know anything," he finally blurted out. The breaking point. The psychological strain on Robert increased with every session. His sleepless nights, lack of food, and constant pressure were taking their toll. Finally, after a 72-hour interrogation cycle, Robert made a critical mistake. "You think I killed her?" "I didn't. She was still alive when I—" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he had just said. Detectives seized the moment. "When you what, Robert? When you saw her last? Where was she?" Robert's lips trembled. I need my lawyer." But the damage was done. They had their first verbal admission. The conclusive evidence. The police immediately secured a search warrant for Robert's home and workplace. There they found strands of Naomi's hair in Robert's car, traces of bloodstains under his fingernails, a set of keys that matched Naomi's diary lock. This was irrefutable evidence, exposing the truth, breaking Robert down, the crucial turning point. The investigators had cornered Robert. His request for a lawyer was not a sign of innocence but of fear. Even with legal representation, the police continued to increase the pressure. They meticulously reviewed every detail: Robert's inconsistent statements, the contradictions in Megan's story, and the forensic evidence linking him to Naomi. A solid case was forming, but to convict him beyond any doubt, they needed a confession. Inspector Larson decided to change tactics. Instead of pressuring him, he let silence speak. He sat across from Robert, staring at him without saying a word. Time passed. Robert avoided Larson's gaze, shifting uneasily in his chair, his hands clenched tightly. Then Larson finally spoke, his voice deep and weighted with authority. "Tell the truth, Robert. We both know you want to." Robert exhaled sharply but still didn't respond. Silence was his last remaining defense. Megan breaks down. Meanwhile, Megan was also beginning to crumble. Unlike Robert, she was not a seasoned criminal. She had been manipulated, possibly deceived. But when confronted by investigators who systematically pointed out the inconsistencies in her statement, she could no longer maintain her composure. "Megan, listen to me," an officer said, sliding a picture of Naomi toward her. "We know Robert wasn't home all night. He lied to you, and deep down, you know it too." Megan's eyes welled up with tears. She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know what he did, but I don't think he was with me all night." That was all the police needed. Confronting Robert with new evidence. With Megan's statement, the police returned to Robert. This time, they didn't accuse him outright. Instead, they played a different psychological game. "Megan is talking, Robert," Larson said, leaning in. "She says you weren't home. She's not covering for you anymore." Robert's face darkened, his lips pressed together, his hands clenched into fists on the table. "You have one chance to explain yourself. One chance before this gets worse." He remained silent. Then Larson delivered the final blow. "We found Naomi's hair in your car, her blood under your fingernails, and a set of keys matching her belongings. Do you really think a jury will believe this is all just a coincidence?" Silence again. But this time, Robert's face turned pale. The confession time was running out. The mounting pressure, the undeniable evidence, and his crumbling support system left Robert with nowhere to turn. He leaned back in his chair, covered his face with his hands, and finally muttered, his voice hoarse, "I didn't mean to." Larson exchanged glances with his colleague. "What happened, Robert?" A long pause. Then, the confession came in fragments. "I saw her. I saw Naomi that night. She was walking alone. I just wanted to talk to her, but she got scared, tried to run, and then I lost control." "Lost control how?" Larson pressed, his voice calm but sharp. Robert shut his eyes tightly, shaking his head. "She fell, hit her head. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." "So you put her in your car?" Larson continued. Robert nodded, his eyes vacant. "I thought she was dead. I didn't mean to hurt her." The discovery of Naomi's body, Robert's confession, though incomplete, was enough for authorities to act immediately. Following his directions, they searched a secluded wooded area near the town, and there, beneath a layer of dried leaves, they found Naomi's body. Forensic teams moved in. The crime scene was meticulously preserved, and every piece of evidence was collected carefully to solidify the case against Robert. The final interrogation. Back in the interrogation room, Larson stared at Robert, now completely broken. There was no more defiance, no more excuses. "You lied, Robert." Over and over again. "And now, Naomi is gone. But this isn't just about you. Her family deserves answers. They deserve to know the truth." For the first time, Robert looked up. His eyes were red. He was utterly defeated. "I didn't mean to kill her," he murmured again. "Then take responsibility. Tell us everything. Let her family have peace." And at last, Robert confessed to everything. With Robert's full confession, prosecutors moved forward with a murder charge. The media exploded with coverage of the case. Naomi's family, though heartbroken, found some solace in knowing the truth had finally been revealed. But justice was not just about punishing Robert. It was about ensuring that Naomi's story would never be forgotten. And in that interrogation room, the truth had finally come to light. The trial, seeking justice, preparing for the legal battle. With Robert's confession in hand, the prosecution swiftly built a solid case. Forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and Robert's own admissions left no doubt about his guilt. However, his defense team was not ready to concede. They aimed to challenge every piece of evidence, seeking to reduce the charges against their client. Lead prosecutor Linda Carver took charge of the case. With years of experience handling serious crimes, she was determined to secure justice for Naomi and her grieving family. Every minor detail was scrutinized to ensure that Robert could not escape accountability. Meanwhile, defense attorney Mark Caldwell focused on arguing that Robert had no intent to kill. He portrayed the incident as an unfortunate accident, asserting that Robert's panic led to poor decisions rather than a deliberate act of murder. His strategy was to convince the jury that his client should be convicted of manslaughter rather than second-degree murder. The case files were meticulously prepared, containing every witness statement, forensic report, and interrogation transcript to form a complete picture of the crime. The legal battle was set to begin, and the entire town anxiously awaited the trial. The trial begins. On the opening day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Naomi's family, reporters, and local residents gathered to witness the high-profile proceedings. A heavy tension filled the air as the judge entered the courtroom. The prosecution started with a powerful opening statement. Carver led the jury through Naomi's final moments, portraying her as an innocent girl whose life was stolen by Robert. She methodically laid out the forensic evidence, inconsistencies in Robert's statements, and the key moments from his confession. When Caldwell took his turn, he attempted to instill doubt in the jury's minds. He emphasized that Robert had been subjected to intense psychological pressure during his confession, claiming that there was no clear evidence proving his intent to harm Naomi. The jury listened intently, understanding the weight of their responsibility. Both sides had prepared compelling arguments to sway the court. Witness testimonies and key evidence. The trial hinged on the testimony of key witnesses and irrefutable forensic evidence. Detective Larson took the stand, recounting the investigation, Robert's changing stories, and how the police uncovered crucial evidence linking him to Naomi. Forensic experts presented findings that confirmed Naomi's DNA was found in Robert's car, along with unexplained bloodstains. Megan, Robert's girlfriend, struggled as she testified. She admitted that she had been deceived by Robert and could not confirm his alibi for the entire night. These testimonies not only confirmed Robert's actions, but also exposed his attempts to cover up the crime. Each new piece of evidence added weight to the prosecution's case, increasing the tension in the courtroom. The defense worked aggressively to challenge the evidence. Caldwell aimed to undermine witness credibility, arguing that Robert's confession resulted from overwhelming pressure and that intent to kill had not been proven. But the jury was not easily swayed. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict and sentencing. After weeks of intense arguments, the jury entered deliberation. The courtroom held its breath as they weighed the evidence. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Robert was found guilty of second-degree murder. While there was no premeditation, the jury concluded that his reckless actions directly led to Naomi's death. The courtroom erupted with mixed emotions: tears, sighs of relief, and anger from those who had hoped for a harsher charge. On sentencing day, Naomi's mother stood before the court, her voice trembling yet resolute. "My daughter never got a second chance. He stole her life, and no sentence will bring her back. But justice must be served." Recognizing the severity of the crime, the judge sentenced Robert to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The decision was met with sorrow, yet also a sense of closure, aftermath, and Naomi's legacy. Although the trial had concluded, its impact remained. Naomi's family turned their grief into advocacy, establishing a foundation to promote child safety and push for stricter child protection laws. For the community, the case was a stark reminder of hidden dangers in society, but it also showcased the power of justice, proving that no crime could remain buried forever. As Robert was led out of the courtroom, his once defiant demeanor was replaced with resignation. He had lost, justice had prevailed, and Naomi's memory would never be forgotten. Aftermath and lessons from the case. Community reaction. After the trial concluded, public discourse did not subside. Naomi's case was not just a heartbreaking tragedy, but also a wake-up call for society. The media continuously reported on the case, highlighting issues surrounding child protection and the urgent need for greater awareness. Many child protection organizations called on authorities to tighten measures against dangerous criminals. Some local communities began implementing educational programs on personal safety for children, teaching them how to recognize potential dangers around them. In Naomi's hometown, residents organized a large memorial service to honor her memory. Floating lanterns were released onto the river, each light representing a prayer for Naomi. This event was not only a demonstration of love and remembrance, but also a commitment by the community to ensure such tragedies would never happen again. The impact of Naomi's case spread beyond her hometown, drawing national attention. People who had never met Naomi sent condolences to her family. Several non-profit organizations took the opportunity to raise awareness and funding for programs aimed at preventing similar tragedies, ensuring that her case would not be forgotten. Discussions on legal reforms erupted across social media and legal forums. Legal experts argued that the current system needed stronger measures to punish offenders and create a safer environment for children. Parents became more vigilant, paying closer attention to their children's whereabouts. Schools and community organizations launched programs to educate children on avoiding abduction and abuse. Regulations on child safety and surveillance were tightened, requiring parents and schools to work more closely together to ensure children's safety. Naomi's family, an irreplaceable loss. Losing Naomi was an indescribable shock to her family. Her mother, Shantara, once a quiet woman, became a passionate advocate for child safety. She dedicated much of her time to working with nonprofits, sharing Naomi's story to raise awareness. Naomi's father, though less public, continued to fight for justice. He worked with authorities to propose legal changes, ensuring that criminals like Robert would never have another opportunity to harm a child. Naomi's younger brother, only 8 years old when the tragedy occurred, suffered deep psychological trauma. The family sought professional counseling to help him cope with the loss, ensuring he understood that, even though Naomi was gone, she would always live in their hearts. Beyond her immediate family, Naomi's friends and teachers also struggled to come to terms with her absence. Those who had once taught and played with her felt the pain of losing someone with such a bright future ahead. To honor Naomi's memory, her family established a scholarship fund in her name, supporting underprivileged children to provide them with opportunities in a safe and nurturing environment. Each year, students received scholarships as a way to keep Naomi's spirit alive in the community. Additionally, Naomi's family advocated for the local government to name a new park after her, ensuring that her story would never be forgotten. 1 year after her passing, Naomi's garden was inaugurated, a safe space for children to play and a symbol of justice and remembrance. Legal impact and justice system reforms. Naomi's case triggered a wave of legal reforms. Lawmakers quickly recognized loopholes in monitoring individuals with criminal histories, particularly those with records of child-related offenses. Several significant changes were proposed, including stricter background checks for individuals with criminal records, particularly those who had committed crimes against children. Tighter post-release monitoring of convicted offenders to ensure they had no opportunities to approach minors. Expanding educational programs in schools, teaching children to recognize danger and protect themselves. Enhanced criminal record tracking to keep better surveillance on offenders after their release. Harsher penalties for crimes against children, ensuring that offenders received sentences reflective of their crimes. These reforms were not just a means of restitution for Naomi's family, but also a significant step forward in preventing such tragedies from occurring again. Justice served Naomi's case became a powerful testament to the fairness of the legal system. Robert received the punishment he deserved, but more importantly, her case shed light on the importance of child protection. The lessons from this case remain loud and clear. No one can escape justice. The truth will always surface, no matter how long it takes. Most importantly, society must take collective responsibility in safeguarding children, the future of our world. Though Naomi's family will never fully recover from their loss, they continue their fight for justice. They refuse to let Naomi's memory fade, transforming her story into a driving force to prevent similar tragedies in the future. And Naomi, though no longer here, will forever be remembered as a symbol of justice and change.